November 6, 1980, Bill Gates guarantees in writing that he will provide an operating system on a new microcomputer for IBM, the largest computer corporation in the world. But Gates has a problem. He doesn't actually own the operating system he promised. Microsoft still has to cut a deal with the owner of QDOS, a small computer shop called Seattle Computer. November 10th. Microsoft's Paul Allen is assigned to hash out a deal with Rod Brock at Seattle Computer. As it is now, the companies have a gentleman's agreement. Brock will get a flat fee every time Gates enlists a manufacturer to build computers with QDOS installed.
They're willing to pay us $10,000 for each one they signed up. And we visualized that very likely they might sell a dozen companies, perhaps even more.
Rod Brock still doesn't know who it is.
We thought that was a bit odd, but they came up with a client and paid us $10,000, so we had our first sale. So we thought we were on our way.
But before the deal is done, Bill Gates will attempt a radical ploy to change his contract with Seattle Computer. Meanwhile, in Bellevue, Washington, Microsoft programmer Bob O'Rear has a lengthy checklist of tasks in order to make the operating system run on a prototype microcomputer provided by IBM.
They had to figure out some way to force fit it onto this machine from IBM. If the software doesn't work, then there's no deal.
By late December, O'Rear is already falling behind schedule.
It was a frantic pace. I basically was either sleeping or I was working on the IBM project.
Crammed into a tiny room, O'Rear suffocates under a mountain of top-secret paperwork, corporate formalities, and inflexible working conditions.
It was a sauna in there, which not only made it very hard for the people working in there,
Very little could be accomplished.
but actually did funny things to the machines.
You're working on software that's untested, trying to make it work on hardware that's untested. I was at my wit's end.
June 25th, 1981. IBM is less than 8 weeks away from launching its first personal computer. While O'Rear frets, Gates is analyzing the computer market and thinking about his deal with Seattle Computer. As it is now, Gates has a non-exclusive agreement with Seattle Computer to license its quick and dirty operating system in exchange for $10,000 per customer. But thanks to Bob O'Rear, Microsoft has improved the software so much that Gates feels Microsoft should be the only vendor allowed to sell QDOS for Seattle Computer.
They said that if we would give them the exclusive, they'd put more effort into selling it.
Brock didn't see what was going on, which was that this was a deal with IBM.
Over the next 2 weeks, Gates and his legal staff draw up a proposed agreement to license QDOS from its owner, Rod Brock. July 10th, with the IBM launch just weeks away, Microsoft sends Seattle Computer the proposed contract. When he sees it, Brock is blindsided by a surprise clause. Microsoft will be the sole owner of QDOS.
Struck me as rather odd. I wondered why he wants to be a sale. We hadn't planned to sell anything.
Microsoft office manager Steve Ballmer and Rod Brock meet to hash out the deal once and for all.
Steve Ballmer said, "We got to get this contract signed." And I said, "Wait a minute, you changed it. You changed the deal we talked about."
Ballmer claims that selling QDOS outright will help Brock, that Seattle Computer will be able to sell computers with the improved DOS, plus have unlimited access to future improvement at no charge. Perhaps most enticing, there's a cash incentive. Microsoft will give Brock $50,000 if he signs the deal now.
And $50,000 at that time was pretty important to us.
July 27th. Banking on an immediate buck, Brock agrees to Microsoft's terms. Every scrap of the quick and dirty operating system now belongs to Bill Gates. 1 week later, Bob O'Rear successfully completes work on QDOS. Gates rechristens it Microsoft Disk Operating System, or MS-DOS. August 12, 1981. Just 2 weeks after Gates signed his deal for DOS, IBM launched its first personal computer. No one expected what happened next. Big Blue had only planned to sell 240,000 computers its first year. Customers clamored for more. A flood of competitors copied IBM's basic design and began selling PCs too. Since Bill Gates' deal with IBM allowed him to sell to anyone he wanted, essentially all of Big Blue's competitors bought language software and an operating system from Microsoft, making Gates a millionaire virtually overnight. While Bill Gates continues to reign supreme over the computer software industry, the strategy that put him in power offers 3 important insights into deal-making tactics. First, defend your future options. While no one anticipates the real demand for the PC, Big Blue weakens its position in the computer market by not negotiating an exclusive agreement for DOS.
At the time, IBM wasn't thinking all that far ahead. The line around IBM was that you don't have big problems in small markets. And they assumed the PC was going to be a small market.
Rod Brock of Seattle Computer loses his once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to cash in on DOS when he lets Bill Gates dictate terms that leave him out in the cold, revealing a second principle: never undervalue your assets.
They often thought that, gee, I should have tried to get an option for 1% of Microsoft stock. And I probably could have got it. Oh, I wish I'd been a bit smarter. One of the reasons I went back to the university and got a business degree.
Lastly, after appropriating DOS, Bill Gates doesn't stop there. He transforms the asset into one of the most lucrative products in the world, a course of action that illustrates lesson number 3. Exploit fate.
What transpired not only reshaped the computer industry, but turned Bill Gates into the richest guy in the world and put IBM and Microsoft in a position where instead of having IBM have all the market value, Microsoft now has twice the market value that IBM has. It was a turning point in corporate history.
Microsoft's deal for DOS. It was a big deal that transformed a small startup company into a global powerhouse worth more than $200 billion. A big deal that changed forever the way we work, play, and communicate.